Hello everyone, I'm happy to have you back on my channel. So today it's gonna be dependency injection with the FX framework from Uber. It's just the basics, so nothing advanced, so maybe that will be part 2. So to start with, I have a question for you, so answer to that question in the comment if you can. So which dependency framework do you use on your day-to-day job, or do you just use natively Go wiring? Alright, so the reason I'm asking that question is obviously the topic of the day. So in a real life project, we have a lot of services, and often they are complying to interfaces. And because we want to have scalable and easy testable components in isolation, often binding those services together is you end up with a big file or sometimes some tricky situations. So that's why we often use a framework, a dependency injection framework. So today we will have an overview of the framework FX. So just the basics to get you up and running. Alright, so first we will have a really short presentation of the FX framework. I just want to show you their website, Uber website, and the GitHub. Then we will go through an example of my own. So you will see later, but the Uber example is an HTTP server example, which is not friendly at all to understand the gist of dependency injection and how their framework works. So we will go through a much simpler example step by step together. Hopefully it will be easier for you to digest. Then I like to do some quick discussion to discuss pros and cons about that framework, so we'll do that in a third part. And then finally I will just display the link to the code from the example, so you will have the code if you want to explore yourself. Alright, don't forget to like the video. It helped me to reach more people because it's raised the popularity of the channel or the video, so you're kind of help yourself as well. So spread the video if you like it, and don't forget to subscribe as well, so then you never miss a video from that channel. And ultimately just for me to understand that you enjoy this kind of content and I can make more, otherwise I won't have much point in doing those. So thank you very much. So I hope you will enjoy that video, and happy coding. Okay, so FX is a dependency injection framework made by Uber. So yeah, like Uber Eats or Uber the drivers service. So yeah, I don't know if you knew, but obviously they have some software themselves, and they developed a framework to smooth a bit the dependency injection when they create microservices. Right, so I'm on the GitHub page at the moment, so it's very lightweight. Obviously their docs are on their website there if you want extensive documentations, but as far as it stands here, so the promises are removing globals. So often in the some main programs you can see like nasty global for singleton and stuff. So FX framework promise is you won't have that. Also code reuse, so that's they implemented some shareable module, but we won't see that because it's too advanced. So the purpose of that first video is just to get you up and running with that framework for very easy cases. And then the third point is beta tested. Obviously they use it for their own systems, so they've been using it a lot, I guess. Right, so then you can see some installation directive there and the number of stars and stuff, but the most interesting thing is there on their website, as I said, so feel free to have a look. So you can see, so the introduction just repeating what they have on their GitHub. Get started is just a walkthrough example. They decided to go through an HTTP example, which is not the easiest if you just want to play around with what's dependency injection, basically. So we'll go through together a much simpler example, which will be helpful, I hope. But once you're comfortable, have a look, because it does explain the philosophy of their life cycle and what an FX application does, and also all their fancy features like annotation, value group, and this kind of thing. So yeah, application life cycle, as I mentioned, is there, and so on. And you can even subscribe, I think, and contribute and keep up to date. So they are running on 1.19 at the moment, so you can keep an eye on that. And that's it for the FX introduction. Alright, so now let's try to implement use that framework FX. So you can see that I created an empty folder, and I'm trying to instantiate a Go mode. So there you go. So you have a Go mode. So the path is tutorial/fx. Then I'm installing that go-get-go-uber.org fx at latest command that was in the instructions. Then we can just create a main program, main application, Golang. So far so good. So we should be able to use their library where it's called fx. So here I'm just like, simple routine check, like our program is running. I just printed hello. So to start with, really quickly, just I just want to do a refresher on the dependency injection. So you can see here I'm creating a struct called main service. Then we will create a receiver method on that main service called run, and it's just printing something like that. So then back to our main, we can invoke that. So it's a receiver method, so I can't invoke that on just a struct. So we can just put main service into a variable and then invoke run on it like that. So we should see main program. There you go. So it's running as intended. So here I can just use my ID shortcut to create a constructor, which will be useful for the next steps. So you can see there, and it's still spitting out main program, so all good. Now let's complexify things a little bit. So let's say that our main service has a dependency. So we can create a struct. That struct can be, we can, for instance, publish something. So we're gonna create a publisher. So that publisher can have a publish method as a receiver method. So like that. So you can see it's like a public publish method, and we will just do some logline to start with to make sure everything is running smoothly. So our main service will have a publisher, then ID shortcut, a constructor for the publisher. There you go, just making things bigger for you to see. So publisher, so the constructor needs to be changed. So you can see my ID shortcut is quite useful there. And then my compiler is on spot and is telling me that my constructor needs something else. So we can declare a publisher and then send that publisher to the constructor. So here I'm doing a sneaky change. So I'm changing, it needs to be a pointer publisher, not a publisher, like that. So all being good, you should see publisher and main program. So publisher from the publisher and main program from the main service. Okay. So let's go even further to make things more interesting. So here I'm just gonna declare a type called title, but it's like an alias for string. So then our publisher will have a title. So then we can print something and make sure that things are properly wired. So you'll see it's gonna be useful for the next step. So publisher and then the title, basically. So the title is, I declared it as a pointer line 29. Oh, so let's just regenerate the constructor. So ID shortcut, there you go. So the logline 36 is probably gonna print me an address from that pointer because title is a pointer, as you can see. So I'm not expecting to see much really. Oh, there you go. So my compiler complained because publisher, the constructor needs a title. So you can just cast, since it's a string, you can just cast the string to title, essentially. And then it needs a pointer. So let's try that. Right. It's compiling, there you go, publisher, and then a pointer address. That's fine. So we can just dereference that pointer. It's not a problem. It might be a problem if it's nil, so you would not do that in production system. You would write test to cater for that. But now you can see hello, and if I change T as goodbye, you can see now it's saying goodbye. So really easy example. So you have a main service, it needs a publisher, and the publisher needs a title. So that's how you would do it without any framework. It's like dependency injection 101. Obviously, I haven't introduced any interfaces, but it would be pretty similar because you would have to comply to the interface, right? So I just checked that my FX framework was available, and it was. So you can see what I wrote right now, fx.new.run, and it will run an FX application. So it's properly installed and it's running an FX framework there. Right? So the way it works is you gonna run a program, but you need to tell what to invoke, otherwise it's just dangling and not doing anything. So here we will invoke a function which take a main service and just invoke .run. So not in the run function like I did, but inside the new is where it's like a registry where you register your providers and construct, basically. So there you go. So then it's really not happy with me because to run a main service I need other components. So you see it's quite good. It's not gonna let me run that program. So let's start step by step as we did with the by hand injection. So it needs a main service. That's fine. We have a constructor. So you have fx provide, and then you're sending the construction you need. Then we need a publisher. That's fine. So we're sending main service and then the publisher constructor. and then we need a constructor for title. So that's fine. I'll show you a trick. So instead of, you could just create a constructor which spitting back pointer title, but here you can just provide an anonymous function. So I'm just declaring on flight a function, and we will send back that pointer. Okay, so I can't do that, so I will just going the long way around. So assigning a variable and then just send it back a pointer of it. Yeah. We'll change it to hello. And now hopefully it will run. There you go. So you just have your FX application running, and the publisher send back the correct string you were expecting. So that's really good. Okay, so far so good. So the application is running. So you can see this is how you inject your providers and run an application, basically. So that's the equivalent of what we just did by hand. So it's just automating the wiring and the injection. All right, so here let's go further. So you know that publisher, usually we don't rely on plain struct like that from the main service perspective. So we define that iPublisher, interface publisher, and it has a method called publish. And then our main service will depend on the abstraction rather than the implementation. So here, instead of the pointer iPublisher, we can just rely on that interface. So there's no need of the pointer because it's an interface. So if we run that, it's probably not gonna run because it doesn't know which interface, which implementation you want for that interface. So you can see here it's complaining, said it can't find, don't really know what to use. So that's fine. So for that, the FX framework created annotation. So we will use that. So I'll show you how. So basically, in each sentence of FX provide, you can annotate your provider. So it's just FX annotate. So we will annotate our constructor. So there you go. So it's just a wrapper, basically, and we will annotate as, and then fx.as is simply an interface casting. So we want to tell the dependency injection framework that the new publisher will give you a pointer publisher, and it will stand as that interface, essentially. So this is how you bind interface to implementation at runtime. So if we run that program again, there you go. So it's not really complaining. You can see the line above at the beginning. It does say which annotation you use. I can just change that to make sure it runs properly. So if we change hello to goodbye, there you go. So now you know how to bind interface, basically, because most of your programs are probably depending on interfaces and not brutal struct to struct. I mean, if you do things correctly, at least it should be like that. All right, so let's go further and complexify a little bit the use case. So now a publisher doesn't have only one title. Let's say it takes a slice of titles. There you go. So I'm just doing some grammatical changes so you can see a variadic function. So if you don't remember what's a variadic function, it's just function with the where the arguments are not, the number of arguments are not set, so you can have as many as title as you want in that constructor now. And you can see here I'm just doing a for loop where I'm going through the titles, so then we can print each title. So nothing really magical or anything. So it's a little bit tricky there, because we have a provider function which gives you a title goodbye, and if I naively create another title, so let's just put hello, let's see how the framework will handle it, because it's expecting a slice of titles. So you can see that it's not really happy because it doesn't know what to do, because it was expecting your don't really know how to inject those dependency. So FX developed something called parameter tags and result tags. So let's have a look together. So all right, let's just do some indentation cleanup for you to see it better. So essentially, your publisher is requesting multiple titles, and titles are required by those publisher. So it goes that way. So the requester will be expose some param tags. So param tags, you can just give a string. So we're gonna call it group titles. Group is important there. It's a feature from the FX framework. So the requester new publisher will have param tags, and then the provider, so I need to add that annotation layer, and then the provider will have result tags, meaning that they will supply for those param tags. So it's called result tags, and then you can see I'm giving the exact same group name, titles. And then I need to do exactly the same with the other title provider. So you can see it's getting a little bit hairy with the indentation, and it's getting quite complex. But we'll refactor and we'll discuss that later. So bear with me. Alright, let's run that. So hopefully it should be running smoothly. So you can see there the hello and goodbye injection. So that works like a charm. Assuming what you know what you're doing, it works pretty well with the result tags and the param tags. Alright, so as I said, it's not really easy to read those providers and stuff, so you can just create some helper function for yourself. So I'll show you how. So those annotations are just a block of provider. There you go. So it's loosely typed, so we can just create a very generic annotation provider. So in our case, it's gonna be providing components for the titles group. So let's just call it title component. So it can take any, and then it's gonna run the any as well to start with. There you go. So it's actually taking just a string. So I could have just put title string as argument. Oh, yeah, there you go. Let's just change it. Yeah. Alright, so title, so it's gonna cast that string into the title tab. So then here we can just invoke that title component. So the second one was goodbye, and the first one was, oh yeah, let's just try it out. There you can see it's running as it used to. All good. And then the first one was hello. There you go. So really cheap and clean refactoring to smooth a little bit that wiring part, that wiring section. Okay, so you can see that it's highly scalable and reusable. So if we just introduce another one, So you can see how the dependency framework just inject what you want, and it does it really well. There you go. A quick observation. So here the type title is just an alias for string, but it could be an interface as well. So you do exactly as we did with the publisher interface. So you would just have to annotate those provider annotation with the fx.as and then new interface. So it's highly composable, essentially. Alright, let's have a look to pros and cons for that framework. So obviously just my personal opinion from what I've seen and what I use on a day-to-day basis. So if you want to challenge any of those points, please feel free to do it in the comments. And actually, I really encourage you to discuss with me if you disagree or if you have a different point of view, because this is how you can sharpen your the way you express yourself and so on the technical point. So it's really good for you. All right. So let's start with pros. So it was an easy wiring, as you saw. It just worked as intended. So you just provide a constructor and then your receiver just wiring it. So you don't have to think about it. It's just doing it for you, and it doing it well. It can handle all the basic cases we needed, as in to start with is casting to interface, depending on interface, and also wiring multiple of a kind, multiple of a type. So it does it really well. And in most services or microservices that you will have to wire, it will handle them really well, so that's good. As you saw multiple times when I was not doing things correctly in the example, the framework did spit a lot of errors, so we didn't spend much time just reading them, but if you're stuck, it's really helpful because it does telling you what's not injected and what's missing, or if there's multiple injection for the same type. So it's really good. And the reusability, so you saw the quick refactoring added for the group, so you can imagine you can end up with a pretty neat and comprehensive wiring section if you need. Right, so I haven't explored modules with you, but I invite you to have a look on the GitHub page about those reusable modules. Alright, now cons. So it does introduce more indirection, as in if you're just using native Go wiring, it's really easy. You declare one thing and this thing goes there, and then you declare another thing and it goes there, and so on. It's really simple to read, right? But it's just when it's getting large, it's complicated and has a lot of wiring in every direction. But that framework does introduce an extra layer of cognitive load, as in you have to understand how dependency injection works and how the framework itself works in order to make it work as you want. Otherwise you end up with a lot of errors and it's not running, so it can be frustrating. Yeah, so it does make it not beginner friendly. So if I would have to onboard a junior, I would, for its first Golang program, I would not show her that framework because it's a lot to take on board. I briefly mentioned it at the beginning of the video. FX is running an application for you, and it has the application lifecycle management. It does add complexity, and it it's not solely a dependency injection framework as is. And it's a bit a shame because, as you know, we software engineers like to have atomic things, like framework does one thing, this framework does one thing. So that's why the example with the HTTP server is bothering me, and it's not beginner friendly because it's not the easiest thing to understand. So if I would have to do one dependency injection framework, I would totally separate it. But if you read the documentation and the design process of that library, that framework, it does kind of make sense, but it just, as in, not all the program or not all the software you write are applications, like runnable applications. Some of them might just be like pure library, like the Siri we you saw about the ASCII tree. So you might need a lot of dependency injection there, but you might not have something to run, but just to build, which is not annoying, but I guess modules are part of that answer, so we can explore that in another video. And then it's not compile time. As you saw, it was crashing. It was trying to run and crash, so that's a problem if you're doing any container technology and you're not really careful. You could just put some server on downtime without really noticing, because if it would be compile time, you can run the compilation during your test phases and then it would not compile, so then you would not deploy a faulty application in your production servers, which is quite bad. Okay, so as promised, here is the link for the GitHub code from the very example you just saw, so then it's easier for you if you just want to copy paste or if you want to have a look by yourself. But I really encourage you to just try it from scratch by yourself. It's way much easier for you, so that's why I've never done it, but I received comments from some of you asking for the code, so there it is. Hope you enjoyed that video about the dependency framework FX, and I'll see you next week. Happy coding. Bye.